Robot Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you are doing well.
In this video, I hope to give some thoughts and critiques about some very odd placements in my view in this latest iteration of the 500 greatest albums of all time list from Rolling Stone. If you guys didn't know, recently they dropped a revamped version of this legendary listing. I went through it. It was pretty interesting. I'll say generally I do like a lot of the placements on the list, especially those in the top 50 or so. I think it's a very diplomatic list. I think that with Rolling Stone, you kind of expect a certain level of standard bearing. There is definitely a lot of that going on, but simultaneously it seems like they were paying at least a little bit of attention to the shifting contemporary music landscape and trying to play a little bit to that, though in my opinion they were mostly ineffective. There are total exclusions from this list, be they numerous jazz greats, Talk, even Aphex Twin. There is no Aphex Twin on this list. Not a lick of Richard D. James. The closest thing we get to Richard D. James on this list are the samples off of Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So it's kind of ironic that we get some artists that are obviously influenced by some fantastic greats that didn't make it onto this thing, but those greats themselves aren't on here. It should also be noted that the mix of artists and albums on this thing are pretty Anglo-centric, or at least centered around artists that hail from the West, which I suppose in theory I don't necessarily have a huge issue with American artists topping the albums list of an American publication, but considering the fact that you're, throwing it out there as the 500 greatest albums of all time, at least I personally, especially in the internet age, would expect a little bit more inclusion of artists from South America, of artists from Africa, of artists from Japan, but yet that is not really here. What I want to go over here are, again, some really weird placements and inclusions that just kind of left me scratching my head. So the first weird placement that I wanted to highlight was Harry Styles' Fine Line at 491. Like, this record, in my opinion, isn't even that much better than his debut. On top of that, it's also the projects that he's just below, as if the album is just a cut under the quality of a Linda Ronstadt Heart Like a Wheel. Also, the Stooges' self-titled debut, one of the most groundbreaking rock albums of all time, and Harry Styles is like right there. That's a bit of a delusion in my opinion. Next one that really stuck out to me in not a great way was Bad Bunny's Siempre at 447. Not only did this beat out the White Stripes' Elephant, Bad Bunny's newest LP is leagues better production-wise and vocally, but also look at the string of albums that apparently it's right underneath. One of the best experimental jazz releases of all time, one of the most classic progressive rock releases of all time, and for some reason the weakest Fiona Apple album, which in a way is also a weird placement in this list. I know there are Fiona Apple records that place a lot higher on here, but Extraordinary Machine, I wouldn't have even considered just how much some of her other material blows this out of the water. However, this isn't as confusing as the placement of Eric Church's Chief at 419, which is easily one of the most generic country rock albums of the past decade. There's really aesthetically and songwriting-wise nothing special about this album. How it almost breaks 400, I don't know, much less beating out all the classics I talked about earlier. But look at the run of albums it's just underneath too. Dire Straits, The Shape of Jazz to Come, Cosmos Factory 2. You're telling me that in this universe, that this Eric Church album is anywhere near this amazing Creedence record? I don't even think Eric would tell you that. 204, Kanye West, Graduation. Kind of blown away this one landed so high on this list, not only because it's not one of Kanye's best LPs, it also beats out 808s despite aging so much worse than 808s and proving to have a lot less influence than 808s. This is easily Kanye's most dated record, and I don't know exactly how it has dominated in the way that it has on this list, but lo and behold, it's here. And how exactly did we get here, where Eagles Hotel California is at 118? This is just a generic rock country pop record from the 70s with a few notable hits on it. You're telling me it's that much better than Led Zeppelin 2? I mean, I think Led Zeppelin 2 is a little overrated, but certainly deserves that placement before the Eagles do. At number 69, we have Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, which is a good record, and it's a record that I'm glad people are going back to and realizing has more artistic merit than maybe many thought it did based on its singles, based on its big hit radio tracks. But am I convinced that this is one of the greatest singer-songwriter albums of all time? Not necessarily. I mean, I think this album should be here somewhere. It's just one of a handful of moments that just really struck me as like an overrate, which I think was even more so the case for Drake's stuff on this list, and even some of the releases that were dropped more recently that I don't think the publication really gave them time to breathe and gain that classic status. Then finally, I think the last general point I'll make about this list and multiple placements on it is just the incredibly large number of compilations on this thing, especially from artists who already have multiple albums on the list. Why? What is the point of this? We already know they're full of good songs. They're compilations. It's kind of cheating in a way. Not on the part of the artist or the label or anything like that, but don't you think it's kind of lazy for Rolling Stone to not, critically evaluate albums, or at least give up on the opportunity to do that by throwing in a record that purposefully is full of hit, popular, nearly flawless songs that the public has already decided are great through buying them and listening to them millions and millions and millions of times? It just seems like such a waste, especially considering how many artists didn't make it onto this list at all. So I don't know. I just sort of see the inclusion of all these comps to be total filler. What's the point? Such a huge chunk of this list is wasted on comps. Those are kind of my biggest placement gripes on this list. Let me know what yours are, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Love you. You're the best. Anthony Fantano, Rolling Stone, 500 Greatest Albums, forever.